Welcome to Hoffmann-Photography. My name is Rainer, and in today's video I would like to introduce you to Hoffman's 3 laws of photography. You may have guessed it already, and it's true. I formulated these laws of photography myself. It took me many years of research, but now I'm ready to publish them. And of course, there are 3 laws because, Newton had 3 laws, and so I thought, many of you guys will probably disagree with Hoffman's laws of photography. But anyway, let's start with Hoffman's 3rd law of photography. Maybe there are exceptions, but in my experience from many photography workshops, this statement is true. And the reason is quite simple. As the cameras get smaller and the displays on the back of the cameras get bigger and bigger, there's less and less room for all the dials and knobs and switches. And so they have to get smaller and smaller. That's bad enough when you are a bit clumsy, like myself. But it gets even worse. Many of these dials and switches have multiple functions and modes of operation. You can rotate, press, click, and so on the same switch, and something quite different happens. Maybe this is just an age thing, and people who can handle their smartphones with their thumbs only perhaps have no problem with all this. But I do. And frankly, most of our workshop participants also have a problem with all these tiny little switches. If I can't change the important camera settings like exposure mode, shutter speed, aperture, ISO number and exposure compensation without having to take my eye off the viewfinder, then that camera is not for me. As simple as that. Which brings us to Hoffman's 2nd law of photography. Don't get me started on this one. I keep shaking my head when I see people holding their camera with outstretched arms. But I've made a whole video on this topic, so let me just say there is a reason why cameras have viewfinders. But here's a fun fact. In German, the viewfinder is called Sucher, and that translates into something like seeker or searcher. So those of you whose mother tongue is English, you are very lucky. You guys just find a view. If your mother tongue is German, on the other hand, then, you have to search for a good view. Ask me how I know. And here is by far my favorite law of photography. I've said it before, but I happily repeat it. The manual exposure mode is way overrated. Mind you, for many years I've used cameras, and one is right over there, that had to be used in manual mode. But still I say manual mode is overrated. Once you've understood the relationship between shutter speed, aperture and ISO number, and that's important, and if you know how to handle exposure compensation, you are much better off with aperture priority or shutter priority. In most cases anyway. Use aperture priority whenever depth of field is important. For example, in landscape, architecture or portrait photography. Use shutter priority when shutter speed is more important than depth of field. For example, in sports and action photography. Well, that's perhaps a bit oversimplified. But in most cases, shutter or aperture priority in combination with exposure compensation is much more comfortable and much quicker than manual mode. There are a few cases, actually very few cases, where you must use manual mode or where manual mode has some advantages, but that's a topic for another video. That's it for today. Thanks for watching.